Hello there, my RPG lovers, and welcome to another video. After almost 4 years since Valhalla came out, we finally got another mainline Assassin's Creed game called Shadows.
I won't let you down.
AC Mirage was like a smaller game in between two major titles, and that's what Ubisoft did a lot with this series in the past as well. When Ubisoft decided to completely revamp the Assassin's Creed series with Origins, it seemed like I'm going to be the part of that target audience because they talked about RPG elements, big open worlds and so on. I personally was never a huge fan of older AC games, just because I'm not that interested in stealth mechanics.
What? It's true!
However, I did enjoy the parkour aspects of those games, as well as some historically inspired events and characters that we could meet. I also loved Black Flag a lot, even though I didn't invest a ton of hours into it, which I do plan to change soon.
Was it good for you as well?
But Origins definitely changed everything for better or worse, depending on who you ask, and it was only the beginning. This might be my unpopular opinion, but Odyssey and Valhalla are my favorite AC games by far.
The battle begins.
To be honest, those games would probably have an entirely different name, but that wouldn't be a great business or marketing decision for Ubisoft. I thought Shadows is going to be right up my alley, despite all the negative things surrounding this title, Ubisoft, and the big outrage on the internet. I really don't care, I just want a good game to play and possibly make a video about them. I expected to experience something similar to Valhalla or any 3 previous big games in the series, because they are very similar in general. Assassin's Creed Shadows is almost nothing like those games, and it's definitely nothing like old AC games.
Well done.
To tell you the truth, I have no idea who is this game for. Anyway, let's start from the beginning. Big thanks to Ubisoft for sending me the review key, and I hope they won't send real assassins after me after this review.
I would have many questions for this man, if only he understood.
Shadows is set in 16th century Japan, where you get to play as an African samurai called Yasuke and a female shinobi named Naoe. The game opens up with Yasuke, who was previously known as Diogo, and this introduction was okay, it was holding my attention. Yasuke and a couple of Portuguese priests are visiting Oda Nobunaga, a brutal and feared warlord.
You may wish to plead for their heads.
At this point, Yasuke is just a sword bearer and a slave, but Nobunaga notices that he has a warrior spirit and he decides to make him a free man. Much more than that actually, he becomes a samurai and his personal bodyguard basically. Now, there has been a lot of discourse on the internet about Yasuke not being a real samurai in history, but you'll see soon enough why that's not even in top 10 problems of the story in this game. My biggest concern for the story in this game was the writing and dialogue. The quality of writing in the intro was not terrible, but it wasn't amazing either. The introduction of Yasuke and Nobunaga was okay, and it was certainly a lot better than what's to come, unfortunately.
That's not possible.
There is a small segment where you get to play as Yasuke in the tutorial, where you get to experience the gameplay a little bit, and we have a lot to talk about that in the gameplay section of the video. Yasuke's introduction lasted about 20 minutes. And then, hold on to your seats, Ubisoft decided to introduce Naoe's personal story. So it's also about 20 minutes, right? Nope, it's about 8 freaking hours.
You are testing my patience.
You are forced to play with Naoe and experience her part of the story, which lasted about 8 hours for me personally, but it will depend on your pace as well. It could be a bit shorter or even much longer for you. I felt very misled here because I thought you can choose between these characters at any given time. That's how Ubisoft did the marketing for this game, and it becomes true later after those 8 hours of gameplay. On the other side, you had a ton of people constantly talking about Yasuke, which could lead you to believe that he's the main character. Well, after you start playing the game, you'll see that Ubisoft really wanted to make Naoe's story the main story in the game. Which would be completely fine if the story was interesting, but hear me out. It's one of the most miserable storytelling experiences that I had the displeasure to experience.
Do you know where I can learn tea etiquette?
Who do I look like? Senoriku?
Who is he?
Maybe that shouldn't come as a big surprise, because AC Mirage was simply terrible when it comes to writing, as well as some other recent Ubisoft games. However, I did enjoy the story and characters of Valhalla quite a bit, and I thought the writing in that game was much better.
I lost my parents when I was 9 winters alone. Without Sigurd, I would have...
The main cast of characters is still engraved in my brain, and even a lot of supporting characters has something memorable about them.
If I wanted to hear you talk shit, I'd gouge out your tongue and shove it up your ass.
I looked at Mirage as just a small game in between, so I hope that writing in Shadows will be on par with Valhalla at least, but I was wrong. Terribly wrong.
So we must come together to form a mountain.
This morning I feel like rubble.
You are a pebble now.
Nobody talks like this. This game has horrible writing and characters, with only a few slightly redeemable factors. Those will be a couple of cutscenes where Yasuke goes through his training and some other cutscenes with Nobunaga, which is by far the best character in the game. Although that's not saying much, to be honest. Oda Nobunaga has some character development and he's well voice acted.
I had thought to kill you all. If the Christians were gone, it would be one less thing to consider.
Naoe, on the other hand, is totally opposite of that. I'm sorry, but the voice acting for Naoe is just horrible. It sounds like the voice actress was just bored all the time while reading these voice lines.
Do you know what I am? My people are born to kill. I am Shinobi.
Naoe's story is very simple on the fundamental level, which is not bad by default. In fact, most great stories have a simple premise, that's not a problem here. Naoe belongs to a clan called Iga, and she's the daughter of the leader. Her father gets killed by some mysterious people shortly after the intro, and their whole village gets attacked by Nobunaga's men. That's very similar to what previous big entries in the series used to do, Valhalla with Order of the Ancients and Cult of Cosmos in Odyssey. But those games did it way better than Shadows. I mean, it's not like Valhalla didn't have some boring masked characters, but it also has some decent plot twists within this feature. Shadows tried to do something similar, and it had plot twists as well, but they are not effective at all because of the bad writing.
We're supposed to be scanning the crowd, not watching the match.
I have 2 eyes.
It was very hard for me to even try to take this character seriously, and you struggle to find any memorable characters besides Nobunaga and Yasuke himself. Maybe Mitsuhide as well, and one comedy relief character, but that's about it when it comes to memorable characters.
Ah, then you're here for another type of sword, perhaps? Nope, but I knew his wife.
You smell like death and piss.
I really didn't care about that kid in the beginning, even though the game really wants you to care. Those moments end up being very cringe and annoying. You spend a lot of time doing quests related to each and every one of these masked characters until you learn their identity and get to kill them at the end. Some of them can be spared, which would be a nice feature if the storytelling and characters were even remotely interesting. Anyway, now I get seriously wounded and rescued by some very boring characters. But like I said before, the game really wants you to care about them, so you get these long and boring cutscenes of Naoe's recovery.
Why do you think that?
Come on, I'll show you.
In between all of that, you get to play through the segments from her past, when she was training with her father. Naoe and Yasuke have unique backstory quests, where you get to learn more about their characters in retrospective. That would be great, if the writing wasn't freaking horrible.
The waterfall will run red, but the blood will not be ours.
I see.
Listen, I'm really not trying to be a dick here, and I'm the last person who would make a negative review just for the sake of it. All the comparisons I did so far was between previous AC games and Shadows. If you even try to compare this story in Shadows to a game like Ghost of Tsushima for example, it will completely fall apart. That's the thing though, it even falls apart completely by just comparing it to previous titles in the series. Yeah, I'm just going to ignore Mirage completely, by the way. This really bothers me on a very personal level because I consider myself to be a fan of Valhalla and Odyssey. I'm pretty sure Shadows is not done by the same development team, and I know Ubisoft has at least a couple of different teams that work on these games. To give the game some credit, these cutscenes are not bad at all, when it comes to the scenario and visuals at least. But even cutscenes range from decent to such high levels of cringe. I mean, take a look at this for fuck's sakes.
We end the destruction.
Yeah, apparently Ubisoft thought that was cool. As for the characters, it's like Ubisoft tried to make them as boring as possible on purpose. You're going to meet a ton of different characters throughout the story, and you're going to forget about all of them 5 minutes after meeting them. Then the game tries to create some quote-unquote meaningful choices in dialogue, like this. This will impact Yaya. Bro, who the fuck cares? I just met this girl like 15 minutes ago. Every now and then the game gives you the option to make some decisions in dialogue, and it never felt like it actually matters. The same thing happens for the most part, no matter what you choose.
This isn't some temple hidden away in the mountains. It isn't safe here.
It isn't safe anywhere.
I'll take care of him.
Yatta!
That's not possible.
Will you help me kill him?
Yes. That's not possible.
Deciding whether someone lives or dies at the end of these quests is the only real consequence of your actions. Again, this would be completely fine if the game actually had some good characters. Most NPCs talk like robots, there is zero chemistry between these characters, and there are a lot of nonsensical moments in dialogue. To make this experience even worse, dialogue segments can have this long pause between the sentences where characters just stand there like morons and stare at each other. Yeah, like we already didn't have enough reasons to hate the fucking dialogue.
Yes. Welcome.
Thank you.
But I want to make it official. Today.
On the bright side, this doesn't happen in cutscenes, only in regular dialogue. One of the first major quests you get to do with Naoe, when you're forced to play with her in the beginning, is downright horrible. You have to learn about the tea etiquette, which is as fun as it sounds. Listen, there is a time and a place for such quests, maybe as optional quests you do later on while exploring the world. But having this as one of the major quests in the main story is like sabotaging your game on purpose. You have to talk with all the guests and, oh my god, the dialogue.
My uncle says I had to grow up before I could learn manners, but I'd rather be hunting.
Oh, what do you hunt?
Bandits.
Bandits?
They are a scourge on our land.
And when you discover the identity, the quest ends like this.
Leave Sakai while you can.
Does she think her threats will stop me? I will find her in Osaka and tear out her heart.
Why you can't kill her right away and why I'm suddenly teleported out there, who the fuck knows? That's just one example of how bad the quest design can be in this game, and this is the very beginning of Naoe's journey. You can only imagine how it progresses. Naoe is easily the worst main character in any Assassin's Creed game up to date. To be honest, female protagonist in Valhalla wasn't that good as well, but I thought Cassandra from Odyssey had a great performance. I played with male Eivor in Valhalla, and I thought that voice actor had an amazing performance, and Eivor was a decent main character in general. Naoe on the other hand is just horrible, and Ubisoft thought it was a good idea to make her the only main character in almost 10 hours of gameplay in the beginning. You know, the full length of some shorter games that you can play and enjoy. I'm really struggling to understand these baffling design decisions. Yasuke's story at least seems interesting on the surface level, and they decided to push that for later. Shadow's idea for two main characters is actually really good. Valhalla and Odyssey had pretty much the same story, regardless of your character choice, there were just some minor differences. But Shadows gives you unique personal stories for both main characters and different quests for both of them. It's a shame that the story itself is bad, because this would be a much better approach to dual main characters in the same story. Even the ability to choose between these two characters before you start some main quest is pretty cool, but ultimately this doesn't matter at all when everything besides that is downright bad. Even after you choose a character, you'll get to see the other main character get involved in the quest somehow, usually at the end of it. It's a pretty cool framework for the main story, and it makes sense when you think about it, but it's just wasted potential. Speaking of Yasuke, his voice actor is actually pretty good.
Not anymore. Whatever will come of my time here, I am ready.
You get to learn more about how he became a samurai, and like I said, there are some glimpses of decent storytelling in those segments. Yasuke's dialogue is not as bad as Naoe's dialogue, but that doesn't mean it's good. It's actually just very boring in general, but he at least has some slightly interesting segments within his personal story. The overarching plot still remains incredibly boring regardless of who you play with. Yasuke doesn't feel like a main character to me. This whole main story is definitely leaning more to Naoe. That's how Ubisoft sets up the main story in the beginning, and the overarching plot continues to lean towards Naoe's personal story a lot more than Yasuke's. Come to think of it, you can literally remove Yasuke from the game and the main story won't change that much. That's crazy because Naoe's story was way worse in general, but there you go. At one point, Yasuke and Naoe start working together for a common goal. Naoe wants to retrieve the box she lost in the beginning that her father told her to protect. The box is related to the secret Brotherhood of Assassins, and Naoe's father was apparently one of them. And her whole mission is to kill everyone, get the box back and avenge her father. Yasuke's mission is to help Naoe because he kinda feels bad for attacking her village with Nobunaga, and he is also involved with the Brotherhood of Assassins somehow. That's not a spoiler, by the way, all of this happens in the early game. The attention to detail within the story and gameplay is almost nowhere to be found in this game. You'll have a lot of story moments before you choose between Yasuke and Naoe, and one of them just disappears or shows up like a ghost from nowhere. Sometimes it's like whatever, but other times it's simply stupid because you'll have this big fight and the other character just disappears, like, what? But the quest design is even worse when it comes to this, much worse, and we'll talk about that right after the combat mechanics. Yasuke almost feels like the supporting side character in the main story, even though you can play with him for 70% of the game. Anyway, to conclude the story, I think it's pretty bad, and I would probably start skipping dialogue after about 5 to 10 hours of gameplay if I didn't plan to review the game.
Who are you?
Who wants to know?
I do.
Naoe's story is just hilariously bad, while Yasuke's personal story is just boring because of the bad writing. I can't remember cringing so much while listening to characters speak in a video game. The moment I unlocked Yasuke, I almost never switched to Naoe unless it was required because of the main story, which happens sometimes. But the main story is just hopeless, no matter who you play with, because they merge together as soon as you unlock Yasuke. I lost all hope for the story after playing that long intro with Naoe, but I still had hope for the gameplay. So what about the gameplay, C4G? Is it worth playing because of the combat, quests or exploration? Let's find out. I played Assassin's Creed Shadows on the highest difficulty, which will be Expert. According to this menu, this is for players who are searching for a difficult challenge, and I'm all about that in these types of games. I'm sure I won't be able to ignore almost all rules for the combat and effortlessly cheese all of these fights even as a lower level character. Surely that won't happen, right? So the whole idea for the combat this time around is to have two very different characters with unique playstyles. Naoe was supposed to be like a classic assassin type character from past games, while Yasuke is just a freaking tank, a huge strong guy, but clumsy when it comes to everything else. The thing is, both of these characters are very clumsy when it comes to the movement and fundamental controls, even though Naoe is much more agile. Moving around in this game feels way worse than in Valhalla, and if you remember my review for that game, which you probably don't because it was 4 years ago, I had some critique for the stiff movement there as well. Moving Naoe around the map can be a very frustrating experience, especially if you played literally any other AC game before this one. Once you start unlocking some upgrades in Naoe's skill tree, the movement does get a bit more enjoyable. She has some very cool animations, that's for sure, but it doesn't matter a lot if controlling her feels bad. I had some fun with her grappling hook, which essentially eliminates the need for a lot of parkour you would have to do. and it instantly eliminates a lot of clunkiness from the parkour system. I really don't understand how they managed to make the controls so clunky when they had so much experience with previous titles. It's embarrassing. I mean, people were criticizing previous games because of the same issue, but trust me, all of those games control much better than this. Switching to Yasuke only makes things much worse. On a bit more bright side, the combat with him feels much better because it feels like it actually has some weight. But on the fundamental level, it's just very clunky, especially when you try to do some parkour. So if you want to play as Yasuke all the time like me, you will have a lot of frustrating moments just by moving around the map and doing some light parkour because he's so fucking slow. I mean, I understand what Ubisoft tried to do here, at least I think I do. They wanted to create two totally different playstyles and offer you the choice to switch between them whenever you see fit. But this theory completely falls apart when one of those two characters is only good for one thing and one thing only. Outside of combat, controlling Yasuke is like driving a car. Even the simplest parkour, like balancing his weight, is extremely slow, let alone climbing walls and walking on steep terrain. I don't know if they thought this is funny or something, but it feels terrible.
Naoe will never let me hear the end of this.
It's yet another reason to play as Naoe, because even though it feels sluggish to control her, she's way faster than Yasuke. Controlling previous main characters in recent AC games were somewhere in the middle. You had a decent parkour system with them, you could still do assassinations, and the whole control scheme felt way better. The parkour system peaked with Unity, but we're never going to see that again, unfortunately. I went back and played Valhalla a little bit, just to get a sense of the controls, and like I said, it feels way better, I'm not crazy here. The movement is snappier and much faster than Shadows in general. It's not nearly as clumsy as the movement in Shadows, it's just crazy to me. Ubisoft's idea to play and switch between these characters is only cool on paper, and such a missed opportunity to give you some very interesting gameplay variety. For example, you can't switch between Yasuke and Naoe when you enter those hostile zones. It would be cool if we could switch between these two characters in the middle of the quest, because that could potentially create some fun gameplay. I guess that was too much to ask for, and I'll soon show you why none of this matters at all. Both characters have a very decent amount of weapon variety, and you can combine two weapons at once. Naoe is obviously an assassin, so she's using a shorter katana, kusarigama, tanto, and some special tools like throwing weapons, the iconic assassin's blade, and bombs. Yasuke has a long katana, naginata, which is the most OP weapon in the game, kanabo, which hits like a truck, teppo, and a bow. Besides the weapon skill trees, Yasuke has one skill tree that's supporting his other general skills, while Naoe has two. That's a very good variety of weapons, I must say, and they feel different enough in combat. You want to avoid open confrontations with Naoe, because she has much lower health, although her weapons are more than capable of taking down a couple of enemies at once. Kusarigama has to be the most unique weapon in the game, and it kinda reminds me of Gogo from Kill Bill.
Hi.
Both characters can use light and heavy attacks and charge both of those attacks for more damage. Those attacks have unique animations for all weapon types, which are decent. There are some pretty cool animations for abilities, and the finisher moves are brutal. Come to think of it, that's maybe the best part about this combat system. I pretty much spammed the heavy attack with Yasuke and used the dodge button to kill everyone in the game. It's funny because that's exactly what all enemies in the game are doing as well. No matter which weapon type you can use this advanced tactic on the highest difficulty to kill everyone, especially if you carry Naginata, which has huge AoE attacks. When I say huge, I really mean it, especially with this skill. Yeah, those are some great hitboxes. Overall, it's more than a decent weapon arsenal for these two characters. Sadly, none of this matters at all because enemy AI and enemy variety is simply non-existing in this game. Up to the point where I started thinking this review version of the game is in beta or bugged. I fought and killed a ton of these so-called bosses in the game and none had any unique mechanics in combat. They all fight almost exactly the same. They can either use a standard attack, a combo attack, which you can tell by the light blue color, or the unblockable red attack. And I shit you not, that's every combat move that you'll see in this fucking game.
Leave no room for hesitation. This is the way of the warrior. No retreat, no doubt.
Every now and then you'll fight some agile assassins which use a smoke bomb, which doesn't do anything at all, of course. I can show you a lot of these clips because I killed a ton of optional and all main story bosses. And I was telling myself, okay, maybe the next boss I fight will have some unique boss mechanics, but nope. How is this even possible? I really don't know. Every boss fight in Valhalla is different, because, you know, they actually had mechanics. Even totally optional bosses in the open world in Valhalla had not only boss mechanics, but even some small background stories that you could learn.
A fallen warrior, neglected by the Valkyries.
I don't know if anyone even playtested this game and how it got a green light to release like this. My whole tactic of fighting these bosses is spamming the strong attack and dodging backwards. You can do this endlessly because there is no stamina or any limiting factor. I mean, sure, you'll get hit and killed sometimes, usually against some very higher level enemies, but you can even kill those much higher level enemies like this. Check out this clip where I totally ignore 50 different enemies in the fort and go straight for a much higher level boss.
You will fall.
I will turn your skull into a sake cup.
Yeah, the game even gives you these close-up zoom-ins to the face to make these encounters very cool. Lol. The balancing of the game is pretty bad as well. Enemies close to your level can die in just a couple of hits, and bosses die in like 10 hits, depending on your weapon. Higher level enemies that you're not even supposed to fight can be killed with some patience, but you can get one-shotted by everyone. I did like the presentation for these main enemies you have to kill. As you progress further in the game, the more wheels you unlock and more people to hunt down and kill. Again, pretty cool framework and presentation for the system, but horrible execution. What's slightly cool about enemies is the armor that you have to break first in order to deal damage. And by cool, I mean the visual part, because you can see when it breaks, or where you destroy their helmets, for example. The armor is just another health bar that you have to deal with before the actual health bar. This could have been a decent system because you have armor-piercing engravings on weapons, and the potential of making some unique builds is there. It's not even close to what Valhalla had, with the crazy big talent tree, but even so, the potential was there. It feels to me like this game needed at least one more year of development, because these systems are just bare bones. The biggest new feature, I guess, is the ability to go prone with both characters. It's almost useless as Yasuke, but it's very useful with Naoe, at least when you don't wanna get seen. Too bad the stealth system is almost pointless in this game because of how broken it is. And don't get me even started about normal and elite enemies. In fact, these so-called bosses are just normal enemies with a huge health bar above their heads. I keep going back to Valhalla, but I hope you understand why. Even the first couple of boss fights you have in Valhalla have different mechanics. For example, Kyotve from the intro is in the game for about 10 minutes, and it's a more memorable character than anyone in Shadows, and he has more mechanics in combat than anyone in this fucking game.
Sigurd Whoreson! Slink around my walls like a thief in the night. Face me here now.
The fight is mine, Kyotve.
It really makes me mad because I actually care. I'm a fucking dumbass, apparently. Oh, I just remembered, some elite ranged enemies have Rain of Arrows ability. It's funny because I didn't even see this ability being used by any of the bosses. You can effortlessly break what Ubisoft wanted to be intended way to play the game. Nothing is stopping you from going straight for that item you need to loot. You don't even need to sneak around with Naue because AI is so freaking stupid. These are the main quests, by the way, and a lot of them just make you pick up something or talk with someone in a heavily guarded place. Sometimes you'll need to be anonymous in order to interact with objects or talk with NPCs, so you will need to fight at least a couple of NPCs before you solve the quests. Why would anyone kill all enemies in these missions, or even sneak around without being seen with Naue? The game doesn't give you a single reason to do that, it's not rewarding or challenging. It's such a broken and unpolished quest design. Take a look at this, for example. You need to pick up a certain item for the main quest, and even though I picked it up while being surrounded by dozens of enemies, the game just casually plays a cutscene with these kids. Oh yeah, he also said this.
You're just a child.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But you killed the commander.
I didn't kill that dude, by the way, but since I got to the item first, the game assumes I did. I don't know. And this happens a lot throughout the whole game. The time just magically stops for Yasuke or Naue while they're surrounded by enemies. Old AC games used to have something similar to a much lesser extent, but it was done in this abstract way. Shadows is just lazy when it comes to this. It totally breaks the immersion, which didn't exist in the first place, but still. Enemy AI is simply terrible, even on the highest difficulty. It's supposed to be much smarter on the expert difficulty, but that's not the case. They can see you climbing on roofs if you play on expert, and that's about it. Most of these main sub-quests go something like this. You meet a guy, he tells you to go and kill a guy who's usually somewhere close, you go back to the guy and he tells you something like, oh, you actually need to kill the boss of that guy that you just killed. I'm not even oversimplifying this. Sometimes the game tries to do something cool, like blowing up a ship, but even that is not fun at all, because of the broken AI. By the way, what the hell happened with some major gameplay features that previous AC games had? For example, Odyssey had these battles between the factions that you can trigger, which wasn't that great, but still. Odyssey also had naval battles and features for the ship. Valhalla had raids, which allow you to raid English territories with a bunch of other Viking NPCs from other players. Kind of like Dragon's Dogma pawn system, but not exactly that deep. It was definitely worse, but similar. Assassin's Creed Shadows doesn't have anything like that.
This morning I feel like rubble.
In fact, they even removed the ability to use the bird to scout the surrounding area. Now you have to zoom in with your character and check out the area by yourself, which is okay, but certainly a lot worse than using the bird. I could talk all day about the broken gameplay of Shadows, and I probably will in a separate video. I didn't even mention the world map, exploration and graphics, so let's do that right now. I'm the type of a guy who really enjoys open worlds. Valhalla and Odyssey had a lot of issues for sure, but I still thought it was fun to discover new areas, especially in Odyssey, which looks freaking amazing. Valhalla was decent as well, but certainly not as good as Odyssey when it comes to the unique looking places. I almost never use the term empty when I criticize open world games because I think it's a very brain dead critique and people overuse it. However, Shadows can definitely be described as empty. There is nothing going on in this huge open world map except some fighting, and I usually don't even know who is fighting and what for. You'll find some side quests here and there, and that's about it. Or just some brain dead activities and a couple of NPCs. Oh yeah, you know how you progress your character in this game and how to unlock new levels in your mastery trees? Well, you need to find these pages on the shrines or pray. Your character will do the same animation on a couple of shrines, or you need to pick up these pages, which takes no effort to find at all. This will increase your so-called knowledge stats. And if you think that sounds fun, I don't know what to tell you. So yeah, almost a completely empty open world, devoid of any rewarding exploration. There were some glimpses of decent exploration in the first zone, but that doesn't happen that often in the game. I mean, you can say what you want about Odyssey and Valhalla, but those games had a lot of caves and underground areas to explore as well, along with all the forts and surface areas of course. Those games also use the water areas way better than Shadows. In fact, there is almost nothing to explore in the water zones in Shadows. The way you get the best armor and weapons is by doing the same shit over and over again. You first need to kill a couple of samurais in the fort and find the legendary chest. Even if you find the chest first, you won't be able to open it because you didn't kill the samurais. To be fair, I also didn't like the RNG progression of Valhalla because you needed to find the combat skills on the map. I thought that was stupid. You can find lower quality armors and weapons sometimes by looting NPCs and regular chests. It doesn't happen that often, which I actually like, because it gives greater meaning to these items, especially those legendaries. A lot of these items look kinda cool, I'll give them that. There is a decent customization system as well, which is definitely appreciated. And of course, there is a store where you can buy items for real money, in a single player game. Again, you can collect those points in the game by just playing and get the items, but still, it's very stupid. It's not in your face and it's completely optional, but it still shouldn't be in the game. The world in Shadows is completely lifeless, NPCs don't do anything except walking around. Previous games were not exactly amazing when it comes to this, but they certainly felt more alive than this. Shadows have some NPCs using the boats, talking to each other in a scripted event, walking through the cities and fields, but that's about it. Oh yeah, you can have a wanted status as well, which will send these guardians or shinobi NPCs to hunt you down. But of course, we don't have the mercenaries from Odyssey or Templars from Valhalla, which was like a bare bones version of the Nemesis system from Shadow of Mordor, but they were still a cool addition to the gameplay. And can you even guess how many unique attacks these NPCs have? That's right, 0. Shadows have different seasons, which affects how the map looks, and it also resets some things in the game. I mean, the game looks nice, and I'm sure it looks even better on the highest details. I played the game on 2K resolution with my 4060 Ti, and I rarely had any frame drops with DLSS enabled. It's a mix of medium and high settings. Still though, I don't think this game looks better than Ghost of Tsushima, but it definitely looks good enough for me. It has some very nice weather effects, which makes the exploration enjoyable from that side at least. I guess I was wrong about Shadows not having any major new features, because now we have the settlement system. I almost forgot about that. Valhalla had something similar by the way, but nevertheless, it's a brand new system where you can build things and talk with familiar NPCs from the story. You need to do some resource gathering in order to build new buildings and upgrade the existing ones. I literally only cared about the blacksmith, because that's where you can enhance your gear. Everything else is like whatever, I only did it when I had to. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a cool looking hub area where you can hang around, which would be fine if the game itself was good. You can ignore it for the most part, although I did hit a brick wall once. I had to grind some resources so I can upgrade the settlement, and it was not that bad. What doesn't make a lot of sense to me though is having to upgrade the settlement once you get the wanted level. It's stupid as it sounds. The wanted level also goes away after the season changes. Speaking about stupid, the majority of fast travel zones are in the middle of the heavily guarded forts. Why? Well, to make them as annoying as possible, of course. God damn it. Luckily, the game gives you these secret hideouts that you can buy and use them as fast travel. Then you have this small minigame with scouts that you have to use a lot if you're playing the game without the guidance features. And let me tell you right away that if you plan to play this game, which I don't recommend at all, you should definitely turn this feature on. Having to manually find these places on the map with this stupid little minigame is just tedious. I fail to see the point here. The music in the game is decent, but not amazing, and the same can be said about the sound effects. I already touched upon the voice acting before. It ranges from solid to bad, depending on the characters. But luckily, they saved one of the worst performances for the main character.
I am Iga.
I like Yasuke's voice actor, he did a good job. as well as Oda Nobunaga and a couple of other main characters. The rest of them, not so much. To conclude this review, Assassin's Creed Shadows almost broke me.
Was it good for you as well?
I really hoped that this game will be at least the same quality like AC Valhalla or Odyssey, but it's far from that, unfortunately. It's worse in every possible way, and I'm actually impressed how they managed to do that. It doesn't have any major features of previous games like raids, big battles between factions, naval gameplay, or anything similar. Previous AC games were heavily criticized online, and I actually agree with a lot of that criticism. They suffered from some old Ubisoft problems, which almost all of their games have, but they were still pretty solid in general, if you ask me. After all, Valhalla sold more than 20 million copies. I highly doubt that Shadows will come even close to that. Now the question is this game unfixable? Well, I don't think they can improve the story, no matter what they do. But the gameplay can certainly be improved by adding unique mechanics to bosses at least, and they would need to improve the AI drastically, at least on the highest difficulty. I would literally recommend any other Assassin's Creed game to play instead of Shadows. In fact, now I'm playing Valhalla again because I miss it and because I'm heavily disappointed with Shadows. I do not recommend buying this game.
I won't let you down.
It's a game for nobody, man. It's not for old AC fans or new AC fans that loved previous 3 titles. I really hope Ubisoft can get their shit together soon, because this is just embarrassing. Anyway, tell me, do you plan to buy this game for some reason? Maybe because morbid curiosity? Leave a comment down below. If you like my reviews, you can check out some other videos on the channel. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more content like this. And if you want to go a step further, consider supporting your boy by becoming a YouTube channel member or a Patreon. Huge thanks to all my current supporters, and I'll see ya in the next one.